that when we can surround ourselves with other people and love on them and start to understand them, especially people that are not like me, right? It's easy to be around people that are within my skin color, my culture, my city, my gender, whatever you want to throw in there that makes it easier. There is a depth and a dimension of love that we can only experience when we start to learn how to love on people that are other to us, and dare say that even are hostile to us. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Roots and Streams podcast. I am your host, Matthew Yamas. And today, if you're just listening in, as I always make it clear, I am doing a solo podcast. I promise you guys, I am, at least mildly trying to reach out for guests. I have ideas and people that I'm hitting up, maybe try to do some couples. I want to maybe try to venture into having myself and my wife talk to another husband and wife. I think that'd be interesting to talk about, just marriage or parenting. There's a lot of things brewing, but one thing I knew is that I wanted to be consistent. Saw a post on Instagram recently about how, just showing up. It was Kev on Stage. You may know him on Instagram, a comedian, just talking about how he doesn't always want to post, he doesn't always want to create videos. But he knows that that's the plan he has and the goals he has set. And not every video is great. Not every video is going to get, hundreds of views, but you got to put up shots. As would be a metaphor of sorts that I actually found that I connected to for basketball. I was like, hey, when you practice or when you're playing basketball, you got to take shots. You might not make them all, but you got to get up shots. So I found that encouraging, and anything I could take to keep me going every Friday, whether I have a guest or not. There is always things to share. It's just in my head, I think, is there something worth sharing? Do people really want to hear from just me? But hey, the last episode, maybe because it had love in the title, it's close to 100 views, which is pretty high for me doing a solo. But with all that said, whatever you have set for yourself, whatever, whether it's the gym or eating right, or working on some type of creative project, or just anything that you have that you just need to have that consistency and persistency, persistence, I don't think that was a word, is to just keep showing up. And it might not be all great. Another quote that comes to mind is better done than perfect. So here I am recording again. Like I said, I definitely have a topic, and today will be today will be Bible heavy. Just letting you know, for anyone who's like, I don't want to hear about the Bible, I don't want to get lured into it, by all means, you can tune out. I would like to believe that my learning and my perspective is fairly open and fairly flexible for everybody, and hopefully even some things that I offer from my perspective can pique some interest and some questions, because a large part of my week, one of the things that I'm trying to be consistent on, is having my Bible study. And Bible study, so for me, it's been a class that I've been taking through the Bible Project, and right now it's on Ephesians. It's a book in the New Testament, and going through. It's an online class, do it self-paced, and I have gotten back. I pulled myself back into the book Anatomy of the Soul, and so pulling things from there that honestly, for me, reading them were jaw-dropping this week. That I found just completely surprised me. I hope you find it interesting too. So today's topic, to round it up, to give you an idea of where I'm going to be talking about for the most part, is going to be on shame and pride versus humility and honesty. and how those things are contradictions of each other, how they can't exist together. And how I was recently reading in The Anatomy of the Soul. And the cool thing about that book that it talks about, it takes the aspect of, just a reminder that it takes that the perspective and information and knowledge from neuroscience, and then takes biblical stories and scripture and kind of combines them or meshes them up, or puts neurological science talk over like what's happening in the Bible. It's really interesting. At least I find it interesting. It may sound super nerdy or super theological, super religious. I find it interesting because I feel like I need kind of both. I feel like there's this, um, for me in my brain, and I hope a lot of people are kind of remeshing some things. I think in this world we live in today, we're trying to compartmentalize. We're trying to put things into different compartments and dishes and containers. And like, I have spirituality here, I have politics here, my finances are here, my relationships are here. When really it's all a mesh. And I'm starting to see that I think it makes more sense that way. And it kind of is all connected. And when we try to separate them, it gets kind of even more messy. Um, but there's that. So let me kick things off with a little bit of structure that I have here. So, what happens when we feel exposed? Do we hide or show up honestly? I know for myself, I always have that feeling of hiding, right? You can't get out of that. Whenever you get exposed or you do something wrong, and you think about how you can just get away with it, right? I don't think people steal and tell lies thinking about how they're going to one day or going to the next moment tell on themselves. No, they're trying to get away with something. They're trying to evade getting in trouble, evade being, told that they're wrong and that they did something wrong, because then that's going to make them feel like they don't fit, and that'll cause like fear and shame. Um, and that is a big part of what I pulled from the book Anatomy of the Soul. Starts talking about, and how, and if you've ever noticed, like how quickly shame turns into blame. And we find it so hard for some people. Maybe some people are super honest, and you're already mature in this. But we find it really hard to just simply say, yes, that was me. I did it. Especially in high stakes situations, right? Like if you cheat on your significant other, if you lie on your taxes, if you steal something that was of large value. And I'm sure there's just, probably way other higher tier, um, crimes or things you can do. That would be, the consequences are very high. And, we do whatever we can to not say like, yes, that was me. Or, right, we say, without saying, yes, it was me, we're saying, yes, it was me, but there's always that additional, I don't know, disclaimer is the right way, but that blame shift. And the example that is pointed at in the book is on Ephesians chapter 3. And so this is in the story of Adam and Eve when they are approached by the serpent, and he's offering them a piece of fruit that they were told they weren't supposed to eat by God. And God said, you can do everything, right? There's all the trees, all the plants, there's like rivers and beautiful land and gardens to just relax in, and just, you can live off of everything, and everything's just free, and milk and honey, right? Just everything is there for you, but just don't eat from this one fruit. And then they get approached by the serpent, who cons them, right? Is very like cunning and conniving creature, cons the woman Eve into eating the fruit. And immediately they feel afraid and they hide, and they feel, and they like, then they all of a sudden know that they're naked. And one of the things that was for me somewhat jaw dropping is that the author points out how um how that God makes the first move, that even that he is not responsible um for what has happened, right? He didn't cause it. um but he makes the first move in trying to reconcile and the relationship. So he seeks them out. And I think so often the stories that we hear, especially when it comes to like church and Bible and things, is like how um, we were just like just all this emphasis on sin, um, not about a God or a creator or a father who is seeking to seeking reconciliation and seeking to rebuild and heal a relationship. But I don't know, just something about that being pointed out in the story, like just these like in these types of like Genesis stories, a lot of times the little simple nuances and simple things that are happening need a lot of attention because there's just a lot of like poetry and meaning that's happening. So when that pointed out to me that God makes the first move, after he was like um, consciously like restraining his closeness to them to offer, opportunity to explore, offer opportunity to even make mistakes. And then hopefully they would come asking questions and admit they're confused. And then they would like make them closer and build a relationship um, between them and God and to each other. Right? That was the hope. So I thought that was really interesting how God makes the first move. So, from reading some of these older stories and in the Old Testament, sometimes we can think like, God is just this always angry, just wants to find me doing something wrong and makes all these rules. But I was pleasantly surprised in revisiting this through the guidance of the author that God makes that first move. And in so, he points out to them, he doesn't necessarily ask about their behavior first, right? He's not saying, what did you do wrong? Because Adam points out, or he shares like, I was afraid, and I'm naked and afraid. And instead of God saying like, what did you think you were doing eating that apple, right? And reprimanding Adam and just, really come down hard on him and like, you did what I told you not to do. He asked first, who told you that you were naked, right? And so he's more so trying to connect to the emotional state that they were in, right? In that fear. And then asks, did you eat from the tree that I, told you not to? And right away, Adam shame shifts, right? Instead of being humble and honest. And this makes me think of sometimes my relationship with my kids. But adults do this all the time too. Adam just says, you know, in, instead of just simply, yes, I did it. He's like, well, Eve is the one who gave me the apple, and you're the one, who gave her to me. Um, he's just like trying to get out of it, even though he's not necessarily lying. I'm just looking through the scripture here. Showed you you're naked. What is it you've done? See, his immediate response was, the woman you put here with me. That he's just straight up first blaming God. Like, you gave me this woman, and she's the one who got me into this mess. She gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. And then he blames Eve, saying she gave me the fruit and I ate it. Because God just said, like, all God said was, have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat from? And Adam says, well, you gave me the woman. The woman gave me the fruit and then I ate it. When he could have just simply said yes, all right, humbly and honestly. And we don't get to find out what that looks like if he just says, yes, God, I did it. And then, so he blame shifts, right? Now we're got a domino effect. And then God goes to the woman and then asks her, like, what have you done? And then what does she do? Blame shift. She says, the serpent deceived me and I ate it, right? Nobody's taking responsibility here. Um, and, uh, and the reason why that's so interesting is that there's a domino effect of ruptures that are happening. Right? When we think of the word ruptures, and I don't think people use that word very often when it comes to relationships, but we're talking about like a breakdown of relationship, a kind of a trying to think of another word other than ruptures. I think I wrote it down here. Right. We're not taking ownership of our wrongdoing. I guess I can't find it. Oh, it gets division, or we're creating a division. We're creating separation in our relationships. We're creating some tension between between us and other people when there is rupture in a relationship, and so they're rupturing their relationship with God now. Right, they're not taking responsibility. They start blaming each other, and when you blame somebody else, right? So that person that is asking you, like when I ask my kids, if they did something, and then all of a sudden they're making excuses and blaming somebody else, not necessarily lying to me, but they're not trying to just come like forward honestly and humbly, and for myself too, right? When I've done wrong things in my marriage, I probably, it's not even that I get asked to me. I'm just straight out hiding in shame. And in that shame, there's also pride, right? We're thinking I am coming from, and pride is the reason why I included like shame and pride, is because it's kind of prideful for Adam, because when we shame, shift, right? Or sorry, blame shift, we're saying, well, I'm not really the bad one. I'm a good guy. I'm a good person, right? And it's like you're boosting yourself up and saying, there's no way that this was just me. And I'm not the one to be blamed here. And I'm a good person. And you're trying to protect your image with from, because you're being so proud, or we're being so proud, or I'm being so proud. And then that turns into shame, because shame is then us saying, my pride is making me even ashamed for doing it, but I won't lie. So I'm gonna blame somebody else. And so I just want to point out there, and the book points it out as well, how like it's like a rupture that is happening, right? A division, a separation between their relationship, and kind of like this just ugliness. And I don't know if you've ever had a relationship with somebody, especially if somebody you've lived with, maybe your wife, your children, roommate, family member, that you just had to be close with, or a coworker, and there was a rupture, right? There was something that happened, and in your relationship with them, and you still had to be around them, and you just like, and when you'd pass each other or had to say something, you just felt like this heaviness, this like this super like uncomfortable feeling like in your heart and stomach, and like the grudge that you want to hold. Like that to me is what happens when there's rupture in relationships. And that's what's happening here for all of them. And another thing that was pointed out is that God the first mention of anyone getting in trouble is the serpent. And so that's another interesting thing to me is that, again, I'm not saying that God isn't harsh sometimes, especially, and you can point it out in certain scriptures and commandments if you like. And man, I'd really like to get people on here that are asking me even more questions, to just unravel and peel back and ask things that we just have to hold tension with and can't figure out today. Um, but so God seeks them out first, right? And is looking to heal and like find them in reconciliation and to reconnect with his children, right? So he's the one who takes that initiative. And then he's concerned about their emotional state, asking like, okay, well, who told you you're naked, right? Like, why is this fear here, right? I didn't leave you with that fear. Why is it there now? And then they start responding and telling their story and blame shifting and having shame and pride. Um, and then the first thing God does is he doesn't necessarily, and not that he doesn't, but it's just interesting that the first party to be disciplined, or cursed, right? If you want to get biblical and to say cursed, it's the serpent, right? It's told that it's going to now have to be on its belly and move on its belly and travel for the rest of its life. And there's other like prophetic things that are told about it being crushed in its head. I won't go down that rabbit hole today. But and I found out recently, like it being placed on its belly, it's just like a status thing, like being on your belly, like on the dirt, like the closest to the ground, is like a status thing that it's being put really, really low, like the lowest of the lows. Um, and I'm curious, what would have happened, or what can happen. I think, I don't want to, I don't think it's always helpful to talk about the story of Adam and Eve from of like, since we're connecting like science here, if like them being the first people, like literally the first people, that made this mistake and now we're paying for it. Um, and that made that alone, what I just said, you may or may not know, but that can cause a rift and people be confused like, Matt, where are you going with this? I just think that I'm not saying it didn't happen, right? And you can even scientifically go down that route. It's like, were there two first men and women, and did this all really happen? I don't know. And I don't think anyone will ever find out. I think the point and the more potent and more useful take from this story is about how this story is just constantly repeating itself. It's not necessarily about that they were the first. It's about that this happens all throughout the world, every day, constantly, every second, right? Is that we're presented with these other options by something that's kind of going on in our mind. And like, whether it's, and the serpent could be greed, it can be lust, it can, all the seven deadly sins that I've recently read about, it can be gluttony, pride. I can't name off all seven of them, but all these things that we feel like, that we that happen and kind of show up in our mind, and sometimes even trick us into thinking that there's security in them and that like they're right. So I would say all those things to me are snakes. All those things are serpents, that we sometimes listen to and we make choices to go with. And then when we get caught or things turn out not necessarily the way we thought, or we feel ashamed for those things, right? It's like, what do we do with that, right? Are we going to choose humility, vulnerability, honesty, or are we going to start to blame shift? Well, I wanted to give to that homeless person, but homeless people are, they are just they're druggies and they don't deserve it. And we start to blame shift. We start to blame that homeless person for us not being generous. That's a whole other thing. I'm like busting up all the controversial things right now, because I know some people have strong feelings about giving to homeless people or just people that are asking for money. And My take is they most likely need it more than me. Um, and if I feel like God's putting in my heart to give, then it's my opportunity to experience the joy of being generous, and that there's more than enough. And yeah, I'll stay away from that rabbit hole, but just that. Um, and just and wondering, what would happen. And I think when we choose, right, because we can't necessarily stop all those things from happening in our mind, but we can choose to maybe to say, nope, I sense that, and that fear or that greed that's there right now, like it's there, and I could choose to not take the apple entirely, or even if I do, realize that, okay, the faster I come clean, or the faster I can admit that this wasn't the right choice, the faster I can reconnect with people, cause and heal my relationship with the people that I may be wronged. Um, and so in this story, though, there's just a rupture, and I'm going to attempt to try to connect it with the other thing that I've been trying to stay constant with is my Bible class, which is on Ephesians, and how Paul, the Apostle Paul, um, I'll let you look him up if you want to know any more about that, but he's the one who writes Ephesians. So it's seen as a letter to these people who are Ephesians, who I think Ephesus is the name of the area they live in. Giving you too much. Um, but it's this letter, and it talks about, honestly, let me actually stay here for a quick second. It talks about the apocalypse, the revelation, the revealing of the Messiah, of what it meant for him to live and die on the cross. And it even talks about how, in my class, about how that word, for the word from the Greek word that I don't know, I don't remember the Greek word, but there's the word is apocalypse that we get in English, but it actually means more so to reveal something, right? Something that is hidden, and then that word that we get apocalypse from is to reveal it, that to unveil it, to remove like the blinders off of it. But it's interesting how a lot of times when we see that word apocalypse, we think of like this epic, like world ending thing, and just destruction and people dying, and there's not enough. And, it's just the apocalypse and mass destruction and natural disasters. And it sounds to me that is like probably the furthest from the truth, from what Paul's talking about. And it's actually already happened. And he wants to reveal and help to us to understand the apocalypse that Jesus was, that the Messiah was, that the revelation that he was and caused. And so that's what it's about. It's not about, like, when you see apocalypse, it's not what we typically think. At least that's what I'm currently learning. Whether you agree with that or not, I understand. That's what I'm learning. And so let me try to draw a line to what I was talking about before. So Paul's really big in Ephesians, talking about how we are meant to really love on one another. And I think almost always we, like, that term, to love each other, it's all about love, has lost some value. But he really points out, through his writings, about how the love for one another, and it's not just one another, it's like for the other, right? So and how we can only experience like the fullness, the apocalypse, like the revelation of the Messiah and everything he's done, and like heaven here on earth, like paradise that we can experience here, not heaven as in somewhere that we're going after we die. Like heaven is, we can experience it here, and there's like thin from there's like thin moments, right, where the land and the skies, or heaven and earth, are kind of crossing over, and we can experience it um through what the lessons and the death and resurrection of Jesus, and like everything that means. That there's a lot to unpack there. But let me just stay on um that when we can surround ourselves with other people and love on them and start to understand them, especially people that are not like me, right? It's easy to be around people that are within my skin color, my culture, my city, my gender, whatever you want to throw in there that makes it easier, that like basketball, and that there is a depth and a dimension of love that we can only experience when we start to learn how to love on people that are other to us, and dare say that even are hostile to us. Because somebody points out in the class how when maybe there's two societies, two countries that are at war with each other, right? And say somebody killed this other person's brother, and the love and forgiveness that can happen between in this relationship. And it's even just saying that, right? And I think a lot of people think like, no, I would never forgive. But when that forgiveness can happen and they can see each other as not as other anymore, that love that can be experienced and the healing that can be experienced is out of this world. He's kind of pointing at. And I think that ties to Genesis, because it's about ruptures, right? When we go to war with each other, when we have prejudices and we have prejudgments about people, these are all ruptures. Without even saying something, or meeting somebody, or just seeing somebody and seeing the color of their skin, or their gender, or they wear glasses, or they're from another city, or they have an accent, they don't speak my language, whatever it is that gets you just thinking like, this person is not somebody that I can love. This person is not somebody I can connect to. That is a rupture. And that is creating a separation and a division between us. And that is like the crux, like the whole thing that happens with Adam and Eve, with them, with each other, and with God. And so I think it connects to Ephesians, because Paul is really talking about how we can only experience what Jesus has done, right, through loving each other, through following him, and through following him, it helps us to love people that aren't like us. It's not easy. It's not easy. And it's not like one day you're like, I'm just going to love this person that's unlike me and they did all these terrible things to me, and so I just got to love on them. I don't necessarily think it's as simple as that. And sometimes churches and leaders can hit us over the head with scriptures and just say, love your enemy. That's what Jesus says. But not take the time to actually like hear my pain and my hurt. And I think that's a part of the process. Because I think when we can listen to the person, right, maybe that is dealing with the rupture, there has to be that, right? Because God does offer an opportunity to listen to what happened. He doesn't just want to blow it all over. He wants to hear about what happened. And I think sometimes that's another thing, is that we overlook, right, maybe some of the healing that needs to happen, the conversations, or how can we say, well, you're just being shameful and prideful. Yeah, but you're not allowing me a safe place to be vulnerable, to be honest and humble with my honesty, because I want to reconnect and to bring healing to this relationship. But the energy and the blame that's being put on me is pushing me towards my pride and to protecting myself and to just sticking with my shame and hiding. I always end up in these kind of nuances, and I'm okay with it. I think yes, scripture, yes, neurology and what's going on in our brain, and yes, holding tension that these things sometimes have nuances and they need more time than just like one page of the Bible. I think it helps to reveal things, but then we have to be patient with people. I think our patience with people, allowing them more than one opportunity to be humble and honest. And I'll even start tying it to, or even with my kids, when they are honest with me but start blaming each other, it definitely kind of boils to the top, like some frustration, and and just seeing them like trying to wiggle out of it, and all I want is just yes, I did it, and them hopefully knowing that the father that I'm trying to be is not one that's trying to just be accountable for the sake of like hold them accountable for the sake of holding them accountable. I want to offer them an opportunity to be humble and honest. Honestly, like I think me just saying that and realizing that right now, I need to remind myself, like when something bad happens for my children or they do something wrong, Matt, remember, and I'm hoping you all can remember, like the first thing that you're trying to give them an opportunity for is to be humble and honest, right? And then we can get into, well, okay, well, you did something wrong, so maybe there needs to be repercussions to help build some boundaries around keeping you from doing that again, or we need to learn some lessons, or we need to have some understanding, right? We need to get into the questions and confusion that happened there. And then we can start to unpack it and try to make better decisions later. But I totally connected to that because I have experienced that of my children trying to blame each other, and it just feels so frustrating and feels like so like time wasting. And I have said before, like just stop, just say yes, I did it and I'm sorry, or I'll try not to do it again. Like I've had to literally stop my kids and be like, I just stop, just stop. And I even give them opportunities to be like, look, if you're lying, I'd rather you tell me now, because it's going to be worse if I find out you're lying. Like, and sometimes they don't get into any trouble as long as they just tell me that, all right, I lied and this is what happened. I try not to let them abuse that, because then, right, they can just always act like they're lying and then tell me the truth and I never get into trouble, right? Yes, there needs to be some wisdom there. But just this connection, back to this connection of how we are to love on each other, especially the difficult ones, whether in our church, in our friend group, at work, because everybody has a story, right? No, I'm not saying, it's another thing that I heard on a recent podcast is like the person that was on, threw some gum. He was a bad place in his life, and one of the things he did doesn't sound too bad, but it's pretty bad, I'm sure, for the teacher. He was able to throw gum into the teacher's hair, and the teacher was so hurt by it. And it even reminds of me. Like I remember when I was in high school, and I think I was a senior, and this was like the beginning of state testing. It hadn't really kicked in yet. There wasn't that much state testing going on. And since the whole high school was starting to adapt it, they wanted everybody to do like these like, I don't know, assignments and like kind of like practices to get ready for the test. And since the seniors didn't have to do it, the school just wanted everyone to do it during homeroom. It's just like, I know the seniors don't have to do it, but just give it to them so they have something to do, and it could benefit them. It's not going to harm. And the sweetest teacher I had, I remember, I think it was Miss Villegas, if I'm remembering her name correctly. It was environmental science, environmental studies teacher. If you went to San Fernando around the time I was there, maybe you know her. And she was great teacher. But I had a really bad moment. And This is nothing. It doesn't sound that bad. But so she's trying to get us to do this assignment, and we're just not having it. Like the whole class is complaining and shouting about it. And then she finally like tells everyone, all right, be quiet. And like she is able to say something to get everyone to be quiet. And I just had the bad timing. Like I was going to shout, I shouted something as soon as everybody got quiet. It was one of those times I was like, okay, everyone got quiet. And then you shout the last thing on accident. And I shouted something like, oh, this is useless anyways. Like, or why are you even making us do this? Like I shouted something like obnoxious, and it broke her. She was crying. It really like, she's like, Matt, I just care about you guys and your education, and I'm just trying to do what's good for you. And everybody got on my case. Um and I felt terrible. And of course I was like, well, and I in my pride, I started to blame the situation of like, well, everybody was yelling. I just happened to yell something at the wrong time. And, why does she have to think that I did something so bad when everybody was yelling it and she was crying because of me? Because everybody pointed at me, and we're talking about it after. But oddly enough, she was the one who kind of helped give me guidance to get me through college, because she just noticed like, Matt, you're a bright kid, which you could not tell from my grades because I had a below a 2.5 grade point average. And she just saw something, and she said, there, at Valley College has a really good program. And she kind of just broke it down for me of what I could do. And she was the one who really like painted that path. She didn't have to, but just the goodness of her heart. Cause I don't ever remember apologizing. Um, and she caught me red-handed in that comment, but she saw something, and I remember her like just kind of in her explanation of what it could look like for me. Like I had bad grades, but I can go to community college, and this is what it's going to look like. And there's good teachers there. And then I can transfer, and like, it gave me an option. It gave me a way of like, oh, maybe I can still do this college thing. And she was very instrumental for that. So shout out to teachers that really care about students and really try to help them regardless of all the rupturing that they are constantly doing in their relationship with you. Um, and yeah, and so I just wanted to point at myself for a little bit, because I know I'm just pointing at my kids. In that, we especially as adults, we have the opportunity, and you may not see it worth it. And but I like to think that there is a lot of healing that can begin if we take a position of just being humble and honest. Um, and it can even be in simple things, right? I was talking to a friend recently, and like vulnerability can start really small, right? It's like when we say we mess up and our kids ask us about it, or we're not feeling good and our kids can notice and ask us about it. Like just saying like, today was kind of sucky, instead of saying, oh no, today was good. I got a bunch of stuff done. Just sharing that today was sucky. Today, today didn't go the way I thought it did. Instead of constantly always trying to say how things are good or okay, probably just saying like things are okay or so is the closest we will. But I think starting small with that, and I feel like that is a bit off topic, but something led me there. And I will start to wrap it up with this. And if you heard anything, I forgot to mention, there's just like so much going on in this house. Nephews are here. My baby's just getting over being sick. I think my wife is working. You probably heard a little bit of all of that, but it's just the situation right now. And hopefully it didn't distract that much. And I'm all good with recording while all of that's happening. It doesn't need to be super quiet for me. Um, I think, I think this kind of connects, because it definitely was a part of my studies of Ephesians, is that the reason why, right, it's so important for us to reconstruct and heal, the reconstruct relationships, and to patch up these ruptures, and to um, do the work that is taken to become to move towards a relationship that when we are loving each other, is because Paul points out that people, especially leaders, are gifts, right? The word for grace and gift is actually the same in Greek. So a lot of times we think of grace as like mercy and forgiveness that we don't deserve, and I think it includes that. But also Paul points out um, how people like the grace of God is also like the gifts that have been given to us in people. And so if we aren't in a position where we can be in good relationship with people, or because we're constantly going to do something to annoy people, right? Myself included. You all like are going to lie, and I'm going to lie probably again, and or just annoy somebody, or just be prideful, or my head's going to get big, and because I have a podcast and I'm going to like maybe gloat about it or expect people to think about me a certain way. Right? We're all going to continue to mess up, unfortunately. Um, but the reason why it is just so important to go after those ruptures, and to with humility and honesty to reconnect one another, to move towards a loving relationship, is because we are all connected, and people are gifts, right? And people have gifts, spiritual gifts in them, or just gifts that can bring healing, gifts that can show mercy, that can show attentiveness and listening, can teach you things, like my teacher, right? um, and just I think it really just goes on in on how important people are, and how like the whole body like together can only exist and reflect the love of God is when it's all trying to be united. Like, yes, things are going to happen, but if we constantly work towards being united and using all of our abilities and our giftings, really the gift is that God is giving us constantly is each other. Um, And I think, and I've said it probably earlier on in like season one, about how one of the greatest gifts that God has given us is people. I mentioned it about therapists. Like, God plays chess, not checkers. Why wouldn't He use a whole army of therapists that are going to help us to heal, mentally, and to go to then move forward to hopefully seeking reconciliation in relationships. Um, and I think that's the only way we can start to maybe shift our view about the creator, the God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. But for me, it's like the God, Yahweh, the creator of this all, and like the father to the fatherless, um, I, um, is to, right, start working on our relationships with other people, and seeing how He will direct us. He will give us, He will provide the humbleness and honesty when we kind of open up our minds and open up our, and the Bible will say, eyes to see, ears to hear, right? When we can kind of, and it may just happen, right? Then we may kind of hit, and sometimes it happens. We hit a dark moment. It's happened for me recently, and of anxiety and separation, and then kind of just like that moment of, whoa, like what's going on? And hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it's just you noticing and saying, no, whoa, okay, I see what's being said here. I see the need for being honest and humble. I see the need um, for each other, and the need for loving on each other. And let me, read more about this, and let me learn how I can be, a better neighbor, a better brother, a better son, a better husband, a better father. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the Bible. I think there's a lot of wisdom, even outside of it, that you can find. But I like finding it rooted in the Bible, and in other places, just because I see the Bible to me is such it just touches on things in a huge meta, like cosmic way, um, that feels very, very appropriate for some of these things, because they're so big and so, the ideas about like the human experience and the powers that are going on of like, evil and good. And so it's good to just go there because it kind of holds that all, and then find other authors, um, and just other people to help build on the ideas that I find in there. Um, so I hope today's episode was of service to you, and would maybe to help rethink of what that story of Genesis is talking about, and or if not that, just to see how we can easily blame shift. We can easily come from a position of pride and start to and shame others, and because of the shame we feel for ourselves, and then how that ruins relationships. And that is really at the heart of it all, and especially in the Bible. And I think of this human experience is like, we're meant to not be that way. We're meant to be in relationship. We're meant to be humble and honest and loving. And I think when we do that, we can really be fully alive and experience heaven on earth. Last tidbit, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. One last little biblical tidbit that I'll throw out here before I got to go pick up my son, because I just remembered it right now. And it is almost entirely off topic, but if you're listening to the song, you're probably a fan of the Bible. You're a fan of this podcast. But it is so something interesting. So at the end of this, so I mentioned how the serpent gets cursed, then Adam gets cursed with having to work the field and having to work the land. It's going to be hard to make field and provide for your family the rest of your life, and you're going to like labor. That's his curse. And then Eve gets cursed with the pain of childbirthing, with birthing children. And let's see. Well, let me just say, so yes. So, and maybe people, if you've listened to this long, you've heard how like, oh, that's why, and maybe you've thought, and I've thought in the past, that's why, when you give, well, that's why child labor, when you're giving birth to a child, is so painful, because it's a curse from God. I recently found out that in the original Hebrew, it's not necessarily saying just that. It's more on the relationship. It's more on the relational, like medical, like side of things, that it's going to be difficult to even get pregnant. And that's really the focus on it. Because the fact that it even says after, so it says you're going to have painful labor, but then it says your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. So, that part doesn't kind of make sense if you only think about the first part before that, about how giving birth is going to be painful. And that the original Hebrew, there's other translations that say, not too many other ones that say, that will greatly increase your pain from conception to labor, right? So from conception to labor. And in even getting pregnant, this makes more sense, because there's a lot of stories in the Bible about how women, right, that had difficulty getting pregnant, and that they longed to get pregnant, and they prayed to God over and over. And they were crying out to God, like, I want to get pregnant. I want to have children. There are many stories like that in the Bible of women who couldn't get pregnant. They cry out to God, or or they desire their husband, but their husband doesn't desire them. And so they're getting pregnant with other people. Like this is more common, and this makes more sense, that just the relational part of getting pregnant and having kids is more so what this curse is about, and what we see in the Bible. And here's the other one that is a little bit more nuanced, but I think makes sense, is that because of this ruptured relationship world that Adam and Eve, right, have created, or the rupture that they've brought into the world, that even when you get pregnant, that fear of the world, and the things that and the situations that you're bringing your children into, is a part of the curse. Which I find, I don't know, I'm not saying this to scare anyone, because I believe that Jesus died on the cross, and that we believe in, and if you're a believer, or you're just curious about it, to read more about Jesus, and how he is the hope, and he is the one that is he is the big God recently heard how he's like the big judo or jiu-jitsu reversal, right? God took everything that was bad and turned it and did this big reversal and used it all to turn it into good. So not trying to scare anybody, but just sharing that little tidbit, nerd translation, interesting thing that I heard about. And that is all, folks. So again, if you've listened this long, I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the likes, comments. I will continue to do my best to record every Friday. And until next time, peace, y'all.